I really love this theme of sparking connections. In fact, would I make it weird if I say I sparked a connection with this university for 4 years by wearing a Speedo? I mean, I'm not wearing one now. That would be weird, okay? It's okay. That would be too awkward for everyone. But in our lifetime, we will spark connections with people that are going to impact our lives in many ways. And sometimes these people may even save our lives. And these are the connections that we have to hold near and dear to our heart and souls because we need them. They may make us cry, they might make us laugh, but they also create special memories in our lives, and that's pretty awesome. And in fact, if you can make a difference in someone's life, then you're doing something pretty special. So today I'm going to talk about some connections and the journey of our connections and how they impact our lives. And as I'm going through this, I want you to think about your connections and how special they are in your life. So let's start off with a connection with our parents. My mom, for instance. And we all have, whether it's a biological mom, adopted mom, foster mom, right? My mom gave me life. And how did I repay her? By crying and pooping. And crying and pooping a lot. That's how I thanked her, right? Because that's what we do. But my time with my mom was pretty short. 8 weeks after I was born, my family and I were hit by a drunk driver. The force of the impact was so great it T-boned the car and it split our car all the way up to the dashboard. My dad had to get stitches on his face from the windshield hitting his face. My brother, who was 3, sleeping in the back seat, didn't have any injuries. And as for me, nearly every bone in my body was broken. My skull was completely fractured from one side of my head to the other. So the fact that I am 53 years old and connecting with you today is nothing short of a miracle. And this is a great moment. And unfortunately, my mom died of her injuries. So now you're looking at a mother's child who never knew his mom because someone drove drunk. Drunk driving plagues our communities to this day. And in fact, let's throw in distracted driving. We have a very unhealthy connection with our cell phones. And too many people are injured. Too many people are dying. I live in Summit County, Ohio. And last year alone, out of the 45 fatalities on our roads, 37 of them were caused by an impaired driving. And it has to stop. We have to do better. And with my injuries, you would never think a baby with all those injuries would grow up to be a competitive swimmer. Even when I started speech therapy class, when I was a kid, no one knew if it was due to brain damage because of the car crash or just normal childhood pains. Now, I think I don't have any brain damage. Of course, my friends might have a different opinion, but they're not here today to share those opinions with everyone else. That's a good thing for us. And also through tragedy, I think we're brought together by people by fate. So let me introduce you to this woman. Her name is Dolly. Now, Dolly is from Jamaica. She was visiting New York for 3 months around the time of the car crash, and she saw the ad my grandmother put in the newspaper for part-time help. And she answered the ad, came to the house. My grandmother was desperate, and she goes, "Do you want to meet baby Michael?" And Dolly goes, "Sure." And we sparked that connection that day when she put her fingers inside my crib, and I latched onto him and I smiled. And she said, "This is where I need to be." Just like today, this is where we need to be. Fate brought us together. And what was supposed to be a part-time job turned into a lifetime role. No one would ever expect that. And that's the connection we made. In fact, when her visa was up after a few years, my grandfather sponsored her to stay in the country. Or kidnapped her, really not too sure which one's which. But this woman raised me and my brother as her own flesh and blood along with my dad. And she made me the person I am. My mom gave me birth and life, and this woman, Dolly, gave me the life I'm able to live. And it's very interesting to see how these people impact our lives and the stories that we have. In fact, Dolly loves telling stories. In fact, around my birthday a couple years ago, she goes, "I remember when you were in your cage." And I was like, "Crib?" She's like, "No, cage." I'm like, "Well, that explains a lot now." Right? And it's all about love. And we all know family doesn't have to be about blood. It's about those people who care and love you and want to see you do well in the world. And it's all brought together by tragedy. As horrible as it was losing my mother, here was a woman who stepped into a white Jewish household and said, "I will raise these boys as my own." That's a pretty special person right there for you. And it's pretty incredible. So that's a little bit about our connections with family. And since I'm back on this campus, let's talk about friends as a connection, where 6 knuckleheads came together on this campus And it was a miracle. We all came from different walks of life. Miami, Florida, Tennessee, New Jersey, Columbus, Ohio, Lakewood, even Delphus, Ohio. And we all bonded in 10 months. And we all became brothers. And it all became a brotherhood based on values and immaturity, of course, right? Because that's what happens when you have best friends. And you would also think when you're friends with everyone and they knew your story and that connection, you would think none of them would ever do anything to put anyone in harm's way or themselves. But even though, and let me introduce you to my friend Big John, who's on this side. And Big John, who knew my story for 15 years, died on May 1st, 2004 as the result of being a drunk driver. So even my connection with him and my story, I couldn't save his life. But he was also responsible for his own choices. And I saw that tragedy and that grief and brought us together. And that's what happens when we have these strong connections in our lives. Good or bad, we're going to be there for each other. No one's going to question anything. You're going to say, I need you. I will be there for you. That's what brotherhood is, sisterhood is, family. So not only are we just friends, we're family. And keep in mind, you're going to be in your 20s, carefree, and attending your friends' weddings. And in the blinking of an eye, you're going to be 50, careless, and throwing axes together. And all you do is sign a waiver, and they go right ahead. Sure thing. It's awesome. But that's the brotherhood we have, and it's amazing, again, how fate brings people together in terms of that connection. And that spark is an amazing thing to have, and never let go of that, because we need those people in our lives. Now, moving on to another connection, sometimes connections only matter to you, and only you understand it. For instance, I'm in the KISS Army. I have a connection with grown men wearing makeup who play in a rock band. You may not like KISS, and that's okay. But, and I love them. I've been teased by it, and that's okay. If you're a Britney Spears fan, fantastic, you connect with her. Weird, but okay. But if you listen to lyrics, whether it's books, art, poetry, if you connect with that and you find meaning in it, no one could take that away from you. And that's a beautiful thing about those type of connections, because it only may matter to you. You know, I love listening to different song lyrics and what it means. And you build that connection, you go, I get this. And then you're one-to-one with the artist. And that's pretty cool. But also, when you share the same artist in that love form, and you connect with those other people, and you share in those memories, that's pretty incredible too. And I love that part about being a KISS fan, because I meet many good people that have been in my life, and we connected because of that. And growing up, my dad loved music, but my dad, God bless him, never told me to turn it off. He only told me to turn it down. And I said the same thing to him about Pavarotti. So we were a bit even that day. So connections with people, connections with things that make sense to you and that you feel it in your heart and soul. Now let's talk about connections in the family. Now my dad and my aunt were 10 years apart of a connection. In 2018, unfortunately, they died 90 days apart. And that grief, and I emulated what my father did for 40-something years with my mom's death. He hid it inside, because that's what men do. In fact, the only time men ever cry is 2 times in their lives. When their sport teams wins a championship, and at the end of Field of Dreams, when they're playing catch with each other. That's about it. And I hid that pain. So when my aunt's death rolled around, I was in that spiral, and I was heading down that dark, deep path. And grief is that love that we share for people. And sometimes we start to lose that connection within ourselves. And it's those people that we connect with that save us. In June of 2018, our foundation was having their very first fundraiser. And it was the same week that I thought I was done. I didn't want to die, I just wanted the pain to stop. And short of doing something silly, that was going to happen. And I had a friend taking photos at the event, and she goes, we can't use these pictures because you have sad eyes. That's a connection that knows you very well. And I thought I was doing pretty good, going, I can hide this. But let's look, our eyes don't hide pain. Our eyes don't hide the depression. Even the smile is a little bit off. That same week, I met with another friend who happened to be a grief counselor. We had lunch together. At the end of the lunch, she said, you don't look like yourself. Why don't you fill out that application and come and see me? And as a man, I'm thinking, I'll be fine. It's quite okay. Because asking for help is tough. And I knew I had to do something. So it took me another 2 days. I went home, for a couple of days, and I thought about it. And I filled out the application. And every question was yes, except for one. I wasn't pregnant. So it was just that one. I was happy with that one. Everything else I would have aced if I was a student in school. I would have gotten an A+. And asking for help is hard. And we have to do it. And what stopped me from ending my life that week was I thought about the connections in my life. I remembered what John's death felt like, and I knew I couldn't do that to my friends. I thought about my dad and my aunt. And my dad, if I did something to end my life, my dad would give me Jewish guilt. And I'm not living with that. Not going to do that. And I got that help. And I also thought about my brother and Dolly and other family members. And I said, I can't send them back to the cemetery 3 times in 6 months. And I got that help. And it was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. And after about 7 months of grief counseling, not even talking about my dad's death and my aunt's death, I was 47 years old, and for the very first time, working on my mother's death and what that meant and how to cope. And also John's death. And after 6-7 months, I had happy eyes. And my friend who took this picture said, this one is happy eyes. You look like yourself. And at the end of grief counseling, even my counselor said, you look like a different person. And I felt like a different person. And there's no shame in asking for help. And if we remember those connections that bring us together and that fate, it's pretty awesome. Because you can still be here and you can thank those people. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Elmo brought people together. People were opening up to a Muppet, which is fantastic. I'm not making fun of that. But as humans, why don't we have that strength to open up to other humans and ask them for help when we need it? Whether it's grief or trauma, whatever it is, our lives are important and they're valuable. And we need that in our lives, those connections. And don't ever take them for granted because they're special. And you never know when your life can impact someone's. And it's a pretty amazing feeling. In fact, when I share John's story to other DUI offenders, because I want them to know your life means something. Yes, you may have driven drunk, but you have a chance to make a wrong a right. And that would have been John's first DUI, and it cost him his life. And I had to work on my trauma and grief with John. And it took time, and it takes time, and you rely on other people. And when you put that aside and you kind of go, my love for John can help save other lives, it's pretty awesome. My bond with my mom saves other lives. She inspires me every day. I'm not perfect. I always want to be a good son my mom and my dad would be proud of, and I try. As long as we try, we're doing something pretty good for that. But the happy eyes, that's pretty important. And we used it was such a good picture with happy eyes, we used it for my cover of my book. And my friends who read my story, they said, we didn't know you were that bad. Call whenever. I go, well, I didn't want to be a burden. Got news for you. No one's a burden to anyone. We have to use those connections so we can keep that spark in our lives. And as the journey continues with yourself and you're falling into that hole, there's a couple of things I want you to remember when you're building yourself back up. Number one, always keep your sense of humor. As a comedian, I can't tell you how many times someone after their show would say, thank you for making me laugh. I really needed that. That's pretty awesome. When you write something at 2 o'clock on your couch and you have no idea how it's going to go and you make an audience laugh and they go, thank you. That's what laughter does. And it's okay if you're the only one laughing at something. Our society has changed in the last few years about what we can't laugh at. Yeah, if you find it funny, it's okay. You can laugh and laugh at ourselves and stay connected to that. For me, it's my own defense mechanism. I know when I lose my sense of humor, I'm in trouble. And when I have it once again, I have the happy eyes, I can make people laugh. And for me, it's those endorphins which are pretty awesome. So laugh if you find something funny. It's okay if someone else doesn't find it funny. It's the same thing with Kiss. It's okay if someone doesn't like Kiss. Well, not you people, you better, okay? I have standards for here today at Ashland. And the other thing I want you to remember is stay connected with yourself. As hard as it might be Stay connected with yourself. You know, if you're feeling that grief and the trauma and the depression, you know, it's very important that we don't lose sight of who we are, the values, the morals, the things that our parents and friends taught us. You know, ask for help. And don't numb yourself if you're grieving and going through trauma don't numb yourself with alcohol and drugs, because then you lose sight of who you are. You know, I never did that with alcohol or drugs, because I also know alcohol with the drunk driving wasn't very good. And I also knew my humor would be that defense mechanism that could pull me out of that hole when I needed it to be. So those are two very important things to remember when you want to reconnect with yourself, your sense of humor, and don't ever forget who you are. Now, I started this with a connection with my mom. I like to end it with a connection with my dad. Because my dad's connection was amazing. Kind, loving man. Got me and my brother into photography because he was into photography. In fact, that's how my dad and my mom met. My dad was shooting a school dance in NYU, and the only person looking at him on a dance floor was my mom. And that's how they connected. That's pretty beautiful. So me and my brother connect with my dad through that. My brother likes to take pictures of wildlife. I love taking pictures of nature, waterfalls, the sunset. That's how I reconnect with myself and find those things that you can reconnect with yourself. It doesn't have to be shared with other people. There's nothing better for me than staying by a waterfall and hearing that water over and over again, taking in the beauty and then going, I gotta pee. That's a beautiful thing, right? Because you're reconnecting with yourself. And my dad gave me that moral compass. And it makes sense I connect with my dad because my hairline starting to look like my father's. Even my behavior sometimes is like my dad's. Even my signature looks like my dad's, which makes sense because I used to forge it a lot as a kid. Not on checks, don't judge me now, but on report cards, because I used to get D's and F's. And the teacher would say, here, Michael, here's your report card. Make sure your dad sees this, signs it, and bring it back tomorrow. I'm like, tomorrow? You'll have it back after lunch. How about that? Thank you very much.